As I said at the early service this morning, this is a very well-known passage of Scripture. It's well-known, but perhaps not well-loved. In our reading today, Jesus talks to his followers about discipleship. In particular, he talks about his experience in ministry, which will include, of course, his suffering, his sacrifice, and his death. He shows the disciples that the way of the cross, his way, will be very challenging. Perhaps that's an understatement. And even more disturbingly, he invites the disciples to follow in his footsteps, to accept this same struggle in their ministry, the same sacrifice, the same service. He tells his followers that this is what discipleship actually looks like. And we get a wonderful description, a full description in our second reading from Romans as well. This sacrificial love that we are called to share. He speaks directly to the disciples, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. So yes, this is a tough reading. It's hard on the disciples to hear this message. And I think it's hard for us to hear this as well today. I was thinking about this reading in the week, and it occurred to me that Jesus probably struggled with the disciples at times, often, in fact. You know, Peter and Andrew, James and John and the others. I think Jesus struggled with them because they often missed the point. They often didn't understand his teachings.
No, they didn't.
In the disciples, we see over and over again a stubborn refusal to hear what Jesus was saying, to listen. And it must have been frustrating for Jesus to share his story with a group of followers who often missed the point.
Yes.
Just before our reading today, Jesus asks the disciples a very interesting question. Who do people say that I am? And they answer. Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He then asks his followers, but who do you say that I am? Who am I to you? And Peter answers, you are the Messiah, the Son of God. The disciples had been travelling with Jesus for some time, and they'd heard the people talking. They'd heard the claims that people were making. And then Jesus turns to his closest followers, but who do you say that I am? Am I a teacher? Am I your brother? Am I a friend? Peter is the first to answer. He says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Translated into Greek, Peter is describing Jesus as the Christ, the Anointed One. When Jewish people talk about Christ, they're talking about their king. They're talking about David. So for Peter, Jesus was a king, a liberator. This was his belief, his hope. And Jesus accepts the title. He responds, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And then, following on from that blessing, Jesus starts to talk about his life and ministry, what it means to be the Christ. He talks about his suffering. He talks about his death. And at that point, the wheels fall off completely. Everything goes sideways. Peter becomes disturbed. He doesn't understand because he wants a different Messiah. He wants a different king. He doesn't want a suffering Messiah or a dead Messiah. He doesn't see Christ in the suffering of Jesus. He wants David. And he certainly doesn't see the glory of God in his own suffering. When I picture this scene, I can imagine Peter looking at Jesus with his mouth hanging open, eyes wide, shocked. And I can imagine the awkward silence. Really? Peter wasn't ready for this faith. He wasn't ready to carry the words of Jesus in his heart. He was holding on to something else. So in our reading today, we're shown a God who is often hidden behind our dreams, behind our assumptions, behind our expectations. And this is the rub. This is where the rubber hits the road. We are shown a Messiah who challenges us and suffers with us. A Messiah who calls us to question our self-serving ways and our self-serving beliefs. Because the life of a Christian, it's not an easy life. It's not a self-serving life. That's what Jesus is saying to the disciples today. At times, I think we can all be a bit like the disciples, drawn to Jesus by the blessings that he shares, drawn to Jesus by his love, drawn by his service, drawn by the hope of resurrection and renewal, looking for a prophet to lead us and liberate us. We can be like the disciples, looking for a king to lead us into greatness. We are like the disciples. We travel with Jesus. We eat with Jesus. We listen to his words. And we do this here every week and hopefully in our homes every day. But are we ready to accept this suffering Christ? Are we ready to follow? Are we ready to be like this suffering Christ? This is a tough reading. Like the disciples, at times we will struggle with this message. We will struggle with this calling. We too will be tempted to turn away when we are confronted by this wounded healer. When we are called to take up our cross and follow. But I think that beyond our self-interest, beyond our limited understanding, we too can catch a glimpse of the true Jesus. Jesus as he was and is. If we are daring, those who want to save their life will lose it. And those who lose their life for the sake of the gospel will save it. Jesus is our suffering Messiah, our wounded healer, the one who calls us to follow. The one who invites us to share the life of God, to live within God, to become one with God. God's love, God's compassion, God's sacrifice, described so beautifully in our second reading from Romans. We are called to honour the teachings of Jesus, our compass, when we lose sight of our calling, our guide when we stray from the path. Not just a liberator. The Messiah, the Christ, is more than just a liberator. In Jesus, we see a road that stretches out before us. We see the way, which is freedom to love and serve God and each other. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.